Welcome back to part 5. Part 5, video 5, however you want to slice it. Some time has gone on between. Ooh, hey, buddy. Hello. He wants food. Hello. Hello again. If you looked at video 4, and now you're looking at video 5, you'll see the time-stamped, well, the screen recording of the corner of my desktop that has a live view of the hour and the date. You'll be able to see how much time has elapsed. I would guess about 40-ish minutes. Yeah, 40-ish. I ended up going to an aquatic center nearby and realizing that they are currently in their annual cleaning. So between August, I want to say 18th to September 8th or 9th, they're basically closed. So I thankfully didn't have very long to go, and I didn't have very long to come back. So here we are, able to record the next and potentially last in this series. Because essentially the way the series is made, and you will have to forgive, I am getting very tired. It's been a very long day, and I have expended remarkable quantities of energy today. The 5th video in this series is about explaining what I mean by becoming an employee of humanity, explaining some of the deficiencies at the core of my character and the dysfunction that I'm learning to remedy. Then video 6 would be a deeper dive on the concept of OnlyHueman and perfect imperfection, and then the 7th would be everything to do with longevity and remarkably extensive time spans, another segment of my projects and initiatives. However, respecting my energy today, we will finish with the 5th, and the other 2 will be part of a different series. As always, you do not need to have watched those that came before to get something out of it, but it will give you significantly more context. I'm also going to take a moment and demonstrate part of how Yep. I was just offered bacon. While physiological energy levels are mostly determined by the amount of energy you have available to you physiologically, there is a component that is psychological in nature that can temporarily be altered. So right now what I'm doing is I'm digging into my mind and I'm aligning the conscious, subconscious, and unconscious to provide a more stable output of energy, drawing from future resources, and it is going to lead to an energy crash later on in the day, but at least for now I am in a state of controlled consciousness. So, wrapping this final video up for this series, once again, it's not going to be structured, it's not going to be scripted. I'm going to go off the top of my head, and it is going to be what it is, an action of accountability and an action of transparency. In time, I'm looking forward to being able to have a production team around me that helps to make and design and record and edit and transmit and market and cut up and distribute various pieces of data, various pieces of content even, though not exclusively content. You see, as I don't necessarily consider myself to be a content creator, I am a creator of many things, systems, designs, civilization, and also, on occasion, content, which is where we find ourselves today. Hello, cutie. He's very cute. As a prospective employee of humanity, my goal is relatively simple. I wish to, on behalf of our population, work to create systems, measures of accountability, productivity, and sustainability that, when applied near exponentially, will create a positive, regenerative trajectory for our species, or at the very least, in the first generation, our culture. The way that I see it is because one of my projects, the Millennium Initiative, spans the next 1,000 years, everything before Y2K is Generation 0, Y2K is Year 0, where I reset the calendar, and then Generation 1 is the first 100 years, Generation 2 is the next 200 years, so right now, in this point in time, we are in Generation 1, but I was born in Generation 0, 1998, or -2 in this new format, which is why you'll often see me writing my years with three numbers, 025, 026, 024, as an example, because I'm removing the 2, and that's part of a different project, which, once again, this will not be a 12-hour video, so if you want a brief overview, I would recommend you look at video 4 in this series, part 4, because it goes over some of the projects in such a way that it helps to highlight that I cannot go over all the projects. This is one of those cases. But back onto the subject of this video, video 5, part 5, becoming an employee of Huemanity, essentially the goal is to demonstrate what I would do and how I would do it. So the thing is, I place no value in not assuming that I'm capable of achieving what I'm capable of achieving. And therefore, I am genuine in my conviction that everything that I say and do is realistically achievable. Now, it doesn't mean I'll go on to do all of it, but it means that any of it could be done depending on the right circumstances. Because of this, I align myself with a future iteration of myself, and I backtrack those attributes. If I know who I'm going to be in 25 years, then I can imagine and feel that level of composure, intelligence, calm, kindness, patience, empathy, curiosity, stability, function. And I reverse engineer that state in a meditative act to essentially refocus and narrow my attention to a single state of present calm. To use a different lingo, I'm channeling my future, whatever that means to you. In so doing, I've come to understand that you can reverse engineer basically anything. Projects, goals, design systems, ways of feeling and being, personal accountability measures, emotional states, realizations, forgiveness, anything. Anything that you can apply yourself to, you can essentially reverse engineer to an extent. This becoming an employee of Huemanity is no different. I know that if I'm going to be even 5% successful in what I think is incredibly likely, I will essentially have the resources of someone with hundreds of millions of dollars. And assuming that I am successful in the way that I fully intend to be, I am going to have access to the resources of multiple billions of dollars. And this is where there's a clash. Now, I'm not saying immediately, it's going to be in 25, 35, 45 years, depending on how things go. But unless I die, I really don't see a way where that will not or cannot happen. There's too many projects, and for not a single one of them to go right, and any of them being able to generate close to that amount of income, I don't see how it's possible. And so because I know with a sense of internal certainty that that is the outcome, I reverse engineer that feeling now, and I use that, I tap into it. Because I know where I'm going to be, I can now also start planning ahead of time how I want to structure my internal responses. I'm looking right now at the world, and I'm seeing people like Elon Musk, who's basically just throwing a tantrum on the world stage. I'm looking at, what's his name, the Microsoft guy, Bill Gates, who may or may not have some interesting ties to Jeffrey Epstein, and who's currently buying a shit ton of land and resources. And it is very hard to have a lot of money and be a good person, because the way that our system is designed, as covered in one of the previous videos in this series, we are currently running with an economic model of capitalism that essentially is self-deregulating. It is a cancerous growth of capitalism. It is self-deregulating. It is self-consuming. And this late-stage devouring form of predatory exponential growth is ceasing to function, because you cannot have a sustainable exponential growth in a finite system. only so many people, only so many resources, only so much land, only so many people who can buy a phone before they don't need another. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, how can you make more money, or how can you save more money? Well, okay, let's transfer our manufacturing overseas so we can have less qualified, or at least less fairly paid labor. It's like, oh, well, okay, well, then we still need to make more money, so let's start using slaves, like Apple with their Foxconn factory, where it got so bad that the workers were trying to kill themselves by jumping off the roofs, and the factory decided as a mechanism to just install nets. Yeah. And so the thing is, this beautiful little blood brick comes at a cost, and I'm really not the biggest fan of Apple. In fact, I kind of feel trapped by this phone, and that is another conversation. But essentially, it is very difficult to be very powerful and not have crushed many necks to get where you are. Nestle is essentially drenched in blood. I think there's no other way to say it. Nestle is a company that is drenched in blood. And the reason why their chocolate tastes so good is because the secret ingredient is suffering. Oh, delectable. Exquisite, orgasmic. You can almost taste the tears of the child slaves. Oh, glorious. And yet, functionally speaking, we have no real system in place that helps us to understand whether or not the cocoa is fair trade. We have no way of knowing if any point in the steps of the distribution of, let's say, this document, this paper, where was the paper sourced? How are the people treated? Where does it come from? Is this made of toxic chemicals where the very act of me touching it essentially starts to harm me without even realizing that my skin is drinking in this context? Same thing with black dyed t-shirts. Like, this is not very good for me, but the people who make these shirts, they don't live very long. And yet, I get to have a cheap shirt from a bulk buy at Costco. In the West, we are privileged. We are privileged because we are the descendants of the people who exploited everyone else. We are the descendants of the victors, and to us go some of the scraps. And the people in charge of us get the spoils. And oh my God, are they spoiled. Look at what Trump is doing right now with the White House. It's more like it's the gold tacky house at this point. And it's going to continue because that's what he does. He's a predatory little cancer blob that goes and devours everything around him in an ever-growing need to feel validated because he doesn't really know what to do with himself, and he understands that he's not intelligent, he understands that he's not a good person, and he also understands that he doesn't really give a shit because he's probably slightly psychopathic on the hair psychopathy checklist, although because he grew up in a state of privilege, the test doesn't really account for those variances. And I'm going to my psychology background now, but essentially, before all of this, I wanted to go into an aspect of criminology to study psychopathy and sociopathy and criminal deviance in general, but specifically psychopathy. The brain of psychopaths absolutely fascinates me, and one of the critiques I have of the PCLR test, the psychopathy checklist revised, well, the hair psychopathy checklist revised, is that the framework is designed to identify the traits and outcomes of individuals who will grow up in sociopathy or psychopathy. Like, for example, multiple arrests or delinquency, getting thrown out, multiple marriages. But when you're raised in a more wealthy estate, a family with a culture and a dignity, a pride, you learn to hide a little better, or the parents are rich enough that you don't really have a criminal record. So some of the elements on the questionnaire are not perfect. Essentially, it's a 20-question checklist with a 0, 1, or 2 score, depending, and it's a whole evaluation criteria. That is a different discussion. But essentially, I remember when I was taking the course that covered this, the teacher was basically explaining how her colleagues, and basically just the scientific community that studied this, had a debate going on. Was Trump a sociopath or was Trump a psychopath? And they truly could not agree because there was one potential factor that made the difference. If Trump loves his daughter, Ivanka, he's probably a sociopath. If he desires her, he's probably more of a psychopath. And in that time, yeah. So the thing is, psychopaths are very fascinating. They're not necessarily bad people. They just don't have the same guardrails that most people do. And so depending on how they're raised, that will go on to wildly, drastically change everything about them. And now, okay, we went on a massive detour. Let's circle back. So the idea being how I can relate these two concepts is your environment goes a very long way to determining how you are and how you function. Trump grew up with an abusive father, an emotionally fucked up mother, because you would have to be fucked up to marry her father, to marry his father. And he grew up with a perpetual understanding that he wasn't good enough, and he literally was not intelligent enough to take charge of his father's empire, and everything that he tried, it kind of just failed all the time. And so at one point he realized he wasn't the smartest, he wasn't going to win his parents' approval, not really, and he resorted to just becoming this narcissistic little blob. He started following his father's footsteps. He got into real estate, but he wasn't really good. Well, no, okay, in real estate he knows people. He doesn't know systems. He can't really account for the the result of an action. He's a psychopath, like poor future planning, poor impulse control. It's very psychopath. But your environment, your circumstances, they come to create who you are, and they amplify that. And so because I know where I want to be, I also have now a measure to compare to where I don't want to be. And right now, in terms of my characteristics, my traits, my emotions, my predilections, how many of them are aligned or not with the version of myself that I wish to be? And that becomes very interesting. It becomes curious, because you start to realize that a lot of who you are, and right now I'm speaking about myself, but this is a general statement I would imagine applies to everyone. I realize that who I am, and who I believe we all are, is a reflection of the past, the present, and the future, carrying on emotional baggage from the past: shame, resentment, doubt, guilt, isolation, fear, cruelty, rage, and a desire for the future, the absence or complement of previous traits, where, okay, I want to feel safe, I want to do this, so I require power, I need influence, I want this, I want that, I don't want this, I want to avoid that. And so you're living in this dichotomy of the past and the present, the past and the future, and both of them pull at you continuously in this massive web of complicated bullshit. And my goal is to essentially untangle that mess. If we are a tapestry woven of individual fibers, then I want to undo the knot and see what the image looks like when every fiber, every strand is undone. What does it look like when there aren't any knots, when there aren't any frays, when everything is in the optimal state of present, mindful being? That's my goal. And so, how do I best get to that objective? How do I make retirement my retirement project? How do I make enlightenment my retirement project? By essentially understanding what I would need to achieve and work backwards. So, if I look at where I would want to be in 25 years, in the year 2050, I will require several billions of dollars worth of capital investment, though my share will be significantly smaller. It's more just like the operating costs of the funds and the businesses and things like that. But personally, I will need to be a millionaire, probably a multimillionaire by that stage. But it also means that I'll have a network of influence, that people will know who I am on a much more global scale. It also means that many of the projects will either be advanced or be preparing for their next stages. It also means that I'll be significantly better at communication. I'll be more patient. I'll be kinder, wiser, because I know that the actions I'm taking now align with that future. And because I have systematically structured essentially every part and core aspect of my personality and my life circumstances and the relationships that I have, the friendships that I have, the partnerships that I engage in, it allows me to align myself with a future orientation. I don't need to know what I'm doing tomorrow, because I know what I'm doing in 3 weeks. I know what I'm doing in 3 months. I know what I'm doing in 3 years, in 3 decades. And if I live that long, I know what I could be doing in 3 centuries. And because of that, I also know who I need to be now in order to be who I want to be in 3 decades, 3 centuries, what have you. And so, because I know I'm going to have access to a lot of power whether that is through the form of money or it's the form of social influence. Think Joe Rogan and his podcast, able to literally sway entire elections. That is power. People listen to him. People respect his opinion. Respected more his opinion. And he had and has, to some extent, power. That is power. And I know that given the path that I'm on, I will either die or become one of the most powerful people in the world. And I say that genuinely with as little ego as I can. Given what I want to do, I will have access to hundreds of millions of people, billions, if not tens of billions of dollars of resources, building a global network of infrastructure. And that's power. And so because I know that's where I'm heading, I am preemptively preparing myself for it, both in a strict standard of integrity, near complete integrity, 99.98% integrity, as best defined by my current understanding of unconditional love, by my best current understanding of unconditional love. That extra little 0.02%, that is specific. One of those, 0.01%, is things outside of my control, life being life. And another 0.01% are for the errors that I will commit that I don't intend to need to hold myself accountable for. Everything else, 99.98%, I intend to be held to account by myself, first and foremost, and literally anyone and everyone else should they desire to try. I will be powerful. I might even be one of the most powerful people in the world, the top 100 list, on a similar list as dictators and heads of multinational trillion-dollar organizations. And that's going to come with a cost. Essentially, no privacy, constant vigilance and security, threats on my life, attempts on my life. I actually fully anticipate at least one attempt on my life by the age of 50, and in fact I'm already preemptively preparing myself for when my apartments or homes are going to get firebombed. So it's having the documents that I need in a place that they won't burn, in a safe, or having copies online. I've also prepared multiple scenarios. What would happen if I die in 5 years, if I die in 10 years, if I die in 15 years, if someone stabs me somewhere, just like they're pretending to want to give me a hug and they just slide a knife in my neck. Like, at a certain point, given what I want to do, given the power that I will achieve as a result of being the person that I am preparing myself for that. So for example, there are multiple companies that I want to start, but there are 3 in a very specific series. The first one is my company, where I learn how to turn myself into a product, a market, a brand. It's OnlyHueman. It's a bunch of books, blah, blah, blah. It's like just the corporation of me. Like, I'm the product and help me manage me. In that company, I'm going to have a lot more control. It will not be a full co-op, but I would like for it to be a partial co-op, in that the people who work for me in that organization have a say in some of the features and some of how things are run, or at least they have the ability to share their voice. They have a decision in what kind of perks they get, or like, I want them to have an input. And that is going to be a test for then Human Enterprises, the second company, that I would like to start in about 5-ish years, where that would be much more of like a genuine co-op. I would probably initially have a seat at the board and some version of influence, but that company would be a test to essentially see how we can make a co-op model that is functional, but also sustainably economical, and yet sustainably exponential. It would essentially have fair compensation for its workers, complete transparency at every level of the corporation, and there would be in the same way that right now corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make more and more and more profit. And for example, a CEO decides to act with integrity, and then the board votes him out because he violated the contract that forces him to get exponential returns on profit. Well, that would not really be a case in this particular system. So instead of just having fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders and stakeholders, instead it would be 4 categories. If someone purchases the product, they essentially become a voting member in a way. Like, they wouldn't get like full executive control over day-to-day operations, but if you purchase the product, you are a user, therefore you are impacted by the product, and you get a say in its development. Ish. And that's a larger conversation. Then if you are an employee of the company, if you work for the company, then you also do have a stake of ownership inside of it, and you have your ability to give your say, vote for certain decisions, and have representative collective power. If you're on the board of directors, the inner management, then of course you have a different, like all four of these sections have different levels of responsibility and influence, and some can veto certain decisions of other groups, but generally speaking, the system is designed to have a measure of accountability. And then the other is essentially the impact of the distribution network, different alliances, contractors, people that they work with. If a system is to be used, if a product is to be used by an individual, a manufacturing source, a tree, like making this shirt, for example. Actually, no, that's not, no, because this is going to be a 20-minute thing on its own, because it's revolutionizing a baby hybrid of Etsy and Amazon for local artisans with an international model of rescale, reuse, essentially solving the balance between non-profitability of an item that never breaks and I'm getting very tired. The term where planned obsolescence, where an item is designed to essentially wear down. Like this shirt is so cheap and shitty that within a year, it's gonna start having holes and crap. Like, but I bought it for the price where I'm expecting it to break. But this phone is designed so that I really should buy a new one within 2 or 3 years because the battery's gonna be crap. There's gonna be new updates. It's a whole thing. The products that we buy are no longer meant to last because they want us to buy it again and again and again, because that's how you generate exponential returns in a finite system. When there are only so many people who can buy a phone, well, you need them to buy the phone again and more expensive because you add more products and services and quality. And of course, inflation, we mustn't forget inflation. And so this becomes a vicious cycle that never ends, functionally speaking. So where does that leave us instead? The way that I see it, it's rather delicate, but also rather complex. We have opportunities ahead of us where, how to explain? It is entirely possible to create an understanding of data. You can archive anything, you can quantify anything, everything, in fact, and it just requires systems and subsystems, most of which are currently being designed by me and eventually iterated with a team of developers and engineers and structural dozens of quantities of people. So essentially the goal is, I can't do this on my own. I can't. I'm trying, I'm doing my best, and I'm very impressed with what I have achieved with the resources and the time that I have and the circumstances that I have. I'm very impressed. Genuinely, I'm very impressed with what I've achieved so far. And I also know that I'm capable of much more. Currently, someone is on what I... Oh, we're very lucky. He was on a different binder, because right now Kitty's taking a nap on a pile. But essentially, this was a table rubric that I showed in a previous... This was a document that I showed in a previous recording or two, but essentially I mapped out and graphed my current state of function. And currently I'm at 0.06. By the end of the year, I could get potentially to 0.1%, but the idea being, currently I'm in phase 2. I'm giving myself, this is the goal. By the end of 2025, this is what I could achieve, and this is the grade measure that it's going to give me in turn. This is where I currently am. And if by the end of the year I get a little bit higher, then that's fantastic. What is bolded is the range that I think is possible and expected. So basically here it's a sort of it's a line that goes up, then it goes down a little bit, then it goes back up. So this is my prediction for the amount of regenerative potential that I have. But right now, because I'm in phase 2, it means that I'm essentially acting in a degenerative state where for every action I have it's a placeholder charge of -1. So essentially there is a perpetual -1 of energy that is removed, which requires that if I want to achieve 3 of output, I need to put in 4. And so the idea is, if I want to achieve twice as much as my potential, I need to put in 3 times as much. If I want to, you get the idea. And if I want to just operate at capacity, I need to literally double my capacity, which becomes a catch-22. And now here's the thing. I am genuinely, and I am not exaggerating, in the 2,500-ish hours of audio and video recorded logs of notes and data, there's probably a good equivalent of 30 to 45 minutes of me just breaking down and sobbing uncontrollably for like 30 seconds to 4 minutes at a time. The 4 minutes are a little rarer, but I've broken down crying out of exasperation and sheer struggle many times, because the thing is, I am not neurotypical. I mask very well, and that's because I've learned to mask very well, because I like learning, I like challenging myself, I like growing, and I do what I do very well. But what I don't do very well, I really don't do it very well. And part of that is self-care. I needed to design, I literally needed to design this care document for my cat, because if not, I would not take care of his needs. I would forget to do his litter. I wouldn't feed him properly. I would essentially miss out on my responsibilities. I wouldn't care for his needs. And so now I have a means of literally seeing, last month, for example, I cared for him 10.5 out of 25. This is my care of him, and this was a previous version, but essentially, last month, this is how much I cared for him. And I actually have a version of this for myself. He's on it right now. Well, he's on a template, but I have this equivalent for myself too, because I literally track a bunch of things. I have about 5 of these in the apartment. This, for example, is a visual log of when I do exercise. My goal is to do it every single day, and depending on which type of exercise that I do, I have a different list, but essentially this is my exercise in 2025, and I have the same thing for the days that I've done either content creation or recording or editing or publishing. I have when I've meditated or read a book, or when I've engaged with pornography, or when I've eaten sugar. I have when I've taken a cold and warm shower to track my hygiene, and ice baths. I have a version for a few different things, and I've been doing this on and off for about 3 years now, and I would have to go, oh, actually, I will go and find it to show you, because it's honestly quite interesting. The things, I have so much data to quantify, to archive. So for example, this is the measure of my fitness in 2024. With percentage grade values given in certain places. Not very optimal. This is the state of my... Oh no, this was an old version that I ended up moving away from. Oh, I guess I was saving this for the sake of the archive. This was 2023, my streaming. So not like my content creation, clearly not very much. This was in 2022, the state of my fitness, a lot better. So this was 2022. I'm very excited about this one. This was 2023. Oh, so this is my fitness in 2023. Also very good compared to everything else. And so you get the idea. I have a bunch of these for different things. Cold showers, for example. So this was my cold showers for 2024, along with notes and documents for updates and things like that. But the black squares are when I had a hygiene issue. So basically the thing is, I have some of these basically every month, and when I don't have them in a month, it's usually because I forget to put it. This year is no exception. So I don't have this one because it's on the wall beside the bathroom, but I struggle to feed myself. I struggle to clean myself. I struggle to take care of myself. I am functionally disabled, and I have a deficiency. I have multiple. I learned to read because I learned, no, I learned to write because I learned to read. I was being held back. So when I got to high school, I was put in my first year in the deficient English class, where essentially the people with helpers and like special ed English essentially. And by that time I had started to read, thankfully. And I remember, I will never forget this, I hope. My teacher, Mrs. Quinn, I will forever have so much gratitude for that woman. Essentially, she was the English teacher at my high school, a Heritage Regional High School. And she altered the trajectory of my life. Teachers are so important, and the fact that we don't treat them like that is insane. But I was in special ed English because I could barely write 10 words without having 7 of them misspelled. My handwriting was so bad. I like chicken scratch. Oh, you're going to be a doctor. It's like bad, like deficiency bad. And even today, it's not that fantastic, but we do what we can with what we have. And I was in special ed English, but by the time I had started reading as my special interest. So between the ages of, I want to say, by the age of 15, I had read 1,500 books. And if we're being a little flexible with the idea of a book, easily 2,000. And if we're including comics, God knows. But by the age of 15 years old, I had read 1,500 books, like books. Like books. Some were 800 pages, some were 200, some were 150, some were an entire series of 1,000 plus. I read so I quite literally am probably the record holder for the person who has read the highest percentage of the library at the high school that I went to. Hands down. And I didn't eat. I skipped my lunches. I went to the cafeteria and read. I was completely isolated on the bus to and the bus home. I read. When I was at home, I would read. When I was in middle class, I would read. And when I was supposed to go to bed, I would be reading in my bed, and my parents had to come and like check to see if I was reading or sleeping. And so when I got to high school, I was put in special ed English, and I was reading in class. But because everyone around was like special ed, I think after 2 or 3 tries to get me to stop reading, she kind of just realized, at least he's not one of the screaming ones. So if he's just going to read, he's going to read. And at one point, she gives us the first test. I really wasn't paying attention in class. I looked at the test, I filled it in. I basically got near perfect marks. And then she eventually gave me another test. I did the same thing. And 2 or 3 tests later, but like maybe 2.5, 3 weeks into the semester, she brings me outside and she says, "Why are you in my class?" It's like, I don't know. I have trouble reading and writing, and I was told that I should be in a classroom of my peers. And she looks at me and she says, no. And she said she was going to look into it. Next thing that I know, a week or 2 later, I am being transferred into the highest grade of English the school offered at the time. And I excelled. I was easily one of the best students for the amount of literal non-work that I did. It was fascinating. I loved the subject. I was interested, and I was so stimulated. So stimulated. But the damage had kind of already been done. I lost confidence in myself. And I now had something to prove. I had something to prove. I also had undiagnosed dyslexia, dyscalculia on the spectrum, and also, unbeknownst to me, severe depression with the occasional bout of suicidal ideation. And I had a magical childhood. I had a painful adolescence. And I had a challenging adulthood. I'm having a challenging adulthood. And I need help. I'm not gonna show it because I don't know what data is on it. I'm looking at a pile of 20, 30 letters. I have so many emails and correspondence. I need help. When I was in the special ed English class, there were people who had helpers. Like the people who essentially kind of just helped them to function, to go to their classes, to remember to be quiet, or to take note of their homework, I need help. And the thing is, I am functional enough and good enough at what I do that I can make it look like I don't. But I'm disabled. I am disabled and I need help. I need a personal assistant because otherwise I'm being very vulnerable right now. It has also taken 5 years of conscious introspective work. 6 years of conscious introspective work to regain the ability to cry. I even had to relearn how to laugh. I did not get into this, and I will not be getting to this here, but there's a reason I said that my childhood was magic. I'm not even exaggerating. It was spiritually abusive is a strong word, but if you raise a child in that environment, it cannot end well. It's not that my parents were bad people. They're not. They're fantastic, loving, caring, devoted people with so much integrity and very close to not unconditional love, but fucking hell, so much love. However, for the very same reason that I have a lot in common with my mom and my dad, I need help, and so did they. And they did the best they could, and I'm doing the best that I can, and I will continue to. Assuming no change, I will achieve full function, by 2050. It doesn't have to be that long. As an employee of Huemanity, the way that I see it is, I'm holding myself to a standard. I mentioned earlier that I will be a very powerful person, genuinely, in my opinion, in my not humble, but in my honest, sincere opinion. I will be one of the most powerful people in the world at the end of the century. Easily. And with that comes a responsibility. What kind of a standard do I want to set? How do I intend to live by my principles? Will I do as I say? Or ask you to ignore the inconsistencies for the sake of the vision? Will I fall below my standard of 99.98% integrity, as best defined, by my current understanding of unconditional love. I hope not. And because I know that that is a possibility, I have been and will continue to put in place mechanisms to ensure that the power I can generate is limited and capped. The wealth I accumulate is limited and capped. The influence I can have is limited and capped. The integrity principles that I live by are designed to trigger certain protocols in culture, in people, in institutions, should my standards fall below operating capacity. The companies that I intend to build will be co-ops with the intention of decentralizing power from me. I want my projects to outlive me. In fact, I want them to be virtually independent, because I want to create a human system, not owned by me, but collectively owned by our species. And so, as an employee of Huemanity, basically almost everything that I make, I intend to either have it free-ish as a very basic model, or free at cost, or free at cost plus 25% with incentive structures to allow for that, with also something that I call the 1% initiative, 100 projects of 1% impact for the singular purpose of aligning and balancing the top and bottom 1% of society. Part of that is literally, I don't know where this is. I literally have lost count of the thousands of documents and folders and drives that I have. At this point, how many terabytes of information do I have? I must be closing in on 25 terabytes of data. At least 50. No, like 25 terabytes easy. Now, of course, that's not all documents and papers, but I have a lot of data. I have a lot of data. This is nothing. This is scraps of paper. This is nothing. And I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life. Every system that I design, I'll be making more or less, to the extent that I can, publicly available. I would very much like, and I will be very much enjoying when I get to the stage where I can afford to build and scale a team that will make these services available to people at cost plus 25%, with operating principles that allow for a 1% revenue to go back into the generated 1% general fund, which will allow for a humanitarian initiative, while also then acting as a personal steward for what I call the 1% promise, or I'll brand it a different way, but it's part of the 1% initiative. It is my 1% promise, where I am making sure that the only way that I can generate $1 billion or more of personal revenue in a single year is by having that be just 1% of my total income. So basically, for me to make $1 billion or more a year in revenue, in a personal profit, like after taxes and everything, I would need to literally make $100 billion in that year. That is the only circumstance in which I will allow myself to become a billionaire in that way, like making $1 billion in a year. Now, of course, it's a little more nuanced than that, but essentially with, I literally have this in a document somewhere. I'm just going to put this to the side. This is literally a document I have somewhere on my computer in one of my drives, but I've essentially categorized when I'm below $100,000 per year, when I'm below $50,000 per year, it's 0%. When I'm between 50 and 100-ish, it is 1%. So basically, right now, in this current state of my life, I have been, for the last 3 years, giving approximately 1% of what I make in a year, so like $400 to $500-ish to the general population. It's individuals that I meet who are homeless or begging. It's buying something for someone. It is contributing to someone's Patreon or Ko-Fi or whatever that might be. It is supporting them by buying merch or by helping them out in a tough spot. I essentially dedicate 1% currently of my income to giving back to the world. And I have designed the system in an incremental way so that percentage 1, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and 90 all go to what I call the general fund, which in time will be, as it grows, and also funded by other people, I hope, it will be a publicly available fund for the basis of what I like to think of as UBI, or a sort of crowd-funded UBI sort of thing, where we can essentially uplift the entire world. I want to make virtually everything that I make available at $1 per year. And to those who cannot even afford that, because in certain countries, genuinely $1 goes a very long way. Very long way. To those people, I would want them to benefit from the people like me and like you, I would imagine. If you're watching this, you're not a salt mine slave. Either 1%, 0.1%, or 0.01% of what people make. Could be, can be, and in my opinion, for me personally, should and will be given back. I guess not. Little fluffy. So now, where am I going with all of this? The idea being, I have designed this structure in such a way that every year, or no, every time I reach the next bracket, like literally, I've branched out every single percentage and the amount of money that I would need to make that year to give 1 more % away. And every percentage chunk goes to a specific organization or cause. So, well, not so much an organization, more they each have a category. So one could be the environment or education systems or this or that or blah, blah, blah. And like I said, percentage 1, 10, 20, all the way to 90, totaling 10% would go to the general fund, which would be my contribution. And the idea being that by the end, once I'm at essentially giving away 99% of my income, it is because I am essentially generating $100 billion in revenue. And that is the only way that I will permit myself to become what would be, in that sense, a billionaire in terms of annual revenue. Now, of course, I know that at that stage you become a billionaire once you have a different kind of... Again, this will not be a 12-hour video, I hope. But essentially, I do like how, as this is the last video in the series, each one is getting progressively longer because I'm taking more time to share and explain. So the people who just want the surface overview can get that in the first 1 or 2 videos. The people who, like you, are interested in getting to understand and follow the journey a little bit more can then literally follow the journey a little bit more. So I'm glad to be meeting with you, and thank you for taking interest. I hope I've been able to convey this in a way that is interesting and that conveys the sincerity of my convictions. And so not only do I want to make sure that the wealth that I generate is redistributed to, like, for example, one of the percentage slots is literally any, so this is not exactly it, I'm kind of forgetting, but 1% eventually after, so it's like in the 11 to 19 section, one of those percentages is a fund put aside for my children, another one is fund put aside for my partners, another one is funds put aside for other stuff. But in the first, so 1 is just general aid in the general fund, then 2, 3, 4, and 5, I believe one of those is the people who have supported me, another one is the people that I've wronged, another one is the people who have another one is my family, another one is basically like very good friends / partners, and then it kind of just goes on. Another one is then the employees. So for example, someone who works for me or does something, my personal intention is to always give back to a factor of 10 in time. And again, genuinely, it is a very complex system that we will not be getting into because there's all kinds of nuances and variations and clauses, and the 10x factor is itself literally an entire other category of projects which is tied to 7 to 12 other systems. We're not getting into that. The idea being, I know that I'm going to accrue power, so I want to make sure that the companies that I make are outside of my ability to fully take over. I know that I'm going to be very wealthy, so I want to make sure that the money that I make is earned and that I pay back my fair share for gratitude at having that opportunity, at wealth and privilege. I intend to make sure that My reputation is such that I am known for my integrity, and if ever my actions don't align with that integrity, then people will catch on to that and hold me accountable and make sure that there are repercussions for those actions. So the idea being, I'm not just asking for money. I have a multi-decade, multi-century plan to alter fundamentally the next 1,000 years of our species' evolution. And the idea is, for example, you hear this all the time, like, oh, I don't know how I can have an impact. I'm just one person. If I don't go to vote, it doesn't really change anything. What can we do? We don't have power. We can't change. And the thing is, yeah, like, that statement is true. However, there's a really powerful scene from the movie Ants that I will pause this recording to go and find because it is worth showing you. Okay, so now essentially I found the clip. What we're going to be doing is there's one there's one primary section, and I found that section in high definition. The only problem is that it is a smaller clip, but then I found a longer version of it in potato quality. So we're going to watch the first version in high quality, and then once it reaches the end of the smaller clip, we're going to go back to potato quality for the second half. So if we go here, you should be able to see this. Oh, wait. Oh, no, sure, I muted it. Let's put the volume down just a tiny bit. And so this is the first 1 minute 13 clip, and it's going to be followed by another one afterwards.
There was that ant that stood up to me.
Yeah, but we can forget about him.
Yeah, it was just one ant. One ant.
Yeah, you're right. It's just one ant.
Yeah, boss, they're puny.
Puny? Say, let's pretend this grain is a puny little ant. Did that hurt?
Nope.
Well, how about this one?
Are you kidding?
Well, how about this?
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up.
Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life.
It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back.
Does anybody else want to stay?
Wrong. You're lower than dirt. You're an ant. Let this be a lesson to all you ants. Ideas are very dangerous things.
You are mindless, soil-shoving losers. Put on this earth to serve us.
You're wrong, Hopper. Ants are not meant to serve grasshoppers. I've seen these ants do great things. And year after year, they somehow manage to pick food for themselves and you. So who is the weaker species? Ants don't serve grasshoppers. It's you who need us. We're a lot stronger than you say we are. And you know it, don't you?
Well, princess.
Hopper, I hate to interrupt, but
You ants stay back!
Oh, this was such a bad idea.
You see, Hopper, nature has a certain order. The ants pick the food, the ants keep the food, and the grasshoppers Leave.
So now, I also want to make you notice something else. I don't know if you know this, but grasshoppers and locusts are very similar, but they are not the same thing. Let's see if I can find a shot where both of them are together. Ah, there we go. See the difference in the skin tone? Oh, yeah, I'll turn my camera off again. So you see here the differences in skin tone. Basically a sort of palish desert sand gray, and then you have over here a nice bright green. Same thing over here, a very pale gray and a very nice green. Well, that's because grasshoppers have a built-in biological mechanism where in times of massive drought or starvation or things of that nature, they essentially become locusts. This is a grasshopper that became a locust and understands that you must do what it takes to survive. And when you are predatory, you must do whatever you need to survive. So now here's the thing. It's not that I'm calling you an ant, but I'm calling us ants. And the people in charge don't acknowledge, appreciate, respect, nor pay back in kind what has been done for them. In a so-called representative democracy, one would expect to be represented democratically. And yet we don't. We get to choose the people from a limited selection pool of criteria. We get to pick the people who are in charge of us from a limited selection pool that has essentially been organized and bred and engineered to only really have the people who cannot contest their power, especially in the United States and other dictatorships around the world like China, Russia, and so forth. Ultimately, it's very important to remember that we are very weak alone. But when there's many of us, we are very strong. And that's part of why my attempt to make this world a better place involves collective bargaining and empowerment. So, now it's time to explain a little more. If you look below, right here, this is the link at which you can find my Ko-Fi page. Essentially, you might have heard of platforms like Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, things of that nature. But essentially, Ko-Fi is, in my personal estimation, one of the better companies out there that provides this service. They are kind and generous. They're not predatory, or at least not in the ways that I've found others are. And I really like their model, to the point where I actually volunteer an extra, I believe, 5% of what I make to them. Right now, it's really not much, and that's going to be the next point that I make. But I would like to take a moment to show you what this looks like on the back end. So, for example, right now, if you look above, this is a progress bar for a goal, phase 2.5. Currently, I'm at around 21% of a $10,000 goal. I don't know why this figure is like that. It's really more, it's closer to 19% than 21%. I'm not sure why it's different, but essentially, I'm around like 1,000, I'm around 1,870 or 90-ish. So essentially, well, I'm probably closer to, well, whatever. Essentially, the idea is that is the total lifetime cumulative amount that I've received for my projects over the last few years. That is my best estimate, because I wasn't always keeping track in this way, but that's more or less what I've received. And right now, due to a few changes in circumstance, I am making $39 a month from 5 or 6 generous people who know me, that I've reached out to, and who have agreed to support me in this way. And now that I've quit my job and become self-employed, this is essentially my income. I'm currently running at a deficit of almost $3,000 a month. And I am, not only have I burned through my savings, I am literally right now accumulating debt. And in the next week or so, I'm going to be removing the $7,000 or so that I have available in my retirement RRSP account. And that's going to help get me to the end of the year. So essentially, the way that I see it, within 6 months, I can be self-sufficient is a strong word, but I can be stable. I don't have 6 months of runway right now. And like you saw before, we all need a little help. And so in the last 4.5 years, I've spent 5,800 hours of unpaid labor towards a passion project that is quite literally designed to uplift and help every living thing on this planet for generations to come. And I'm stuck in a bit of a catch-22 because I need a team to organize production schedules, product design, iteration, customer support, feedback, personal aid, physical therapy for my injuries. The system that I designed for myself is cool and all, but it can only do so much. Oh, I'm sorry, baby. It's like, this is designed to track my level of function. And when I started it, I was level 1 dysfunctional. After my surgery, I was level 0 non-functional. And I'm not even right now functional, literally at this moment in time, having been sitting and not doing anything physical today. Pain, discomfort, both of my knees are in actual pain right now. My lower back is slightly in pain and slightly in discomfort. And most of the joints that I can immediately feel are in a state of discomfort. My fingers, my knuckles. Vulnerability, discomfort, pain, discomfort, pain, discomfort. Not much, actually. Not much. Discomfort. I could go through my spine, I could go through my feet, my legs, my joints hurt. And so part of what I also need to do is literally get physiotherapy, have a trainer, have a nutritionist, a diet plan. And I'm not saying, hey, that's the first thing I'm doing with money. No, but it's more that my goal is to be functional, to have access to my body, to be able to literally get up without pain. I'm sitting right now and I have pain. I would like to be able to know that I'm going to be able to feed myself or to clean myself. Like, I don't know if it's a little TLDR, I don't know if it's a little TMI, too much information, but I'm currently not in a state of hygiene and I feel crass and disgusting. And I don't know why I have so much trouble taking basic care of myself. I live with a permanent disability. And it's not that I want a personal chef. It's not that it's that I literally need someone whose job it is to help me help myself so that I can help us both. And right now, I'm making $39 a month. So, one problem at a time, one phase at a time, one project at a time. I'm not trying to sell you on the mission. I'm trying to explain to you why I am dedicating the entirety of my life, thousands of hours, and literally to the point of going into personal debt. Currently hovering around $10,000. After the withdrawal, I'll be back down to like 3,000-ish, because it's not a full 7,000. I lose some to taxes because I'm essentially taking out of a retirement account. So I'm going to lose almost like 2K from it, or at least 1,500 out of the 7K. So I'm going to get like 5.5K-ish. And with that amount, I can essentially not wipe out the debt, but go back down to maybe like 3,000 of debt-ish. No, more like 4,000. And then by the end of the year, in the next 3 months, hopefully be back to 10,000 and not more. That's really kind of the wiggle room that I'm giving myself. And so the thing is, I need help. And I hope that if you have listened this far, you will understand there's genuine potential here. The way that I communicate shows that I'm good when placed in various circumstances. Now imagine if I had a team to help me. Imagine if I did this for a living, and not just as my best attempt to do it as a living. I'm not expecting hundreds of millions of dollars for the next 10-ish years. But for the next 3, if I make less than $50,000 a year, this isn't sustainable. And the progress will slow. It will not stop, but it will slow. And I genuinely do not see a reason as to why that has to be the case. So on my end, I'm working with multiple business partners to get initiatives off the ground, but the revenue return on that will be slow and incremental. And certainly right now I need to not be homeless by the end of the year. And so I'll now take a few moments to show you the support infrastructure that I'm building on the back end. This is my link tree with a few links to different platforms, but right now we will go to this here. Essentially, the way that I see it, the goal is relatively simple. Creating open access tools for personal growth and societal change near everything I make and will be making is free. Knowledge should never be locked behind a paywall, nor reserved for the privileged few, a human right. This fund supports the cost of creation, keeping knowledge free. Our phase milestones. In 2023, I received $100 from people's generosity. In 2024, I crossed the $1,000 mark. I'm hoping that in 2025, in the next 3 months, I get to this stage. And then, in 2026, I would very much like to show proof of concept with $100,000. Hi, I'm Anref, an employee of Huemanity. I design open access frameworks for human growth, weaving together consciousness, longevity, self-improvement, and societal transformation. My core belief is simple. Knowledge should be free, not hidden behind paywalls nor reserved for the privileged few. Through tools, protocols, reflections, conversations, and tracking systems, I aim to help people align more deeply with themselves and each other. Most of my work is public, because I believe transformation multiplies when it is shared. This journey isn't funded by corporations or brands. It is powered by those who resonate with this mission and choose to support it directly. Your support keeps this work alive, growing, and accessible. If you believe in this vision, welcome. You're exactly where you belong. And so then, if I go into the tiers, a one-time donation can definitely be done, and also there's this. So we'll go into a different view. Essentially, right now I'm working on the badges because the badges themselves, I want to modify them a bit, and I'm hitting technical limitations. I just haven't dedicated the time to it, but the rest should be more or less kind of complete. So I did the math, and actually for this, I'm going to pop back in. Hello. So I did the math, and I realized that how I want to make most of my money is with what I call a token of support. It is an item of significance that is small enough in value that you would hesitate to pick it up if you saw it on the ground. However, it is large enough that you almost certainly would. It's meaningful, but it's not going to break the bank if it disappears. And for most people, that would be $1. And so for $1 a month, it's the supporter tier. Right now it is linked to a Discord rank with certain privileges and permissions and things like that. In time, I want to essentially scale more access and support. And my goal actually is to make I want 50% of everything that I make to be free regardless of cost or no. I want for $1 a month for 98% of everything that I make to be free, and so on and so forth. And so the idea is I then calculated worldwide, what would $1 be as a token for most people. And it turns out that 85% of the world could give this and barely notice it's gone. And so this is the messages that I ended up making. Also, I'll turn off the camera again. So for the supporter tier, to the 85% of the world who could give this and barely notice it's gone, thank you for noticing something most people overlook. That small choice means more than you know. And if you can't afford this right now, I'm not asking you to. Your presence matters just as much. And so in Canadian, this is all Canadian, not USD, it's $1 a month or $12 a year, which in USD is 75 cents a month or $9 a year, as per my last calculation. And I'm also tracking a top Hall of Fame, the people who support the first ones to do it in various categories. And so essentially the way that I've also organized it is that for the $1 a month, there are 10,000 places. For the $1 a week, $4 per month, there are 1,000 places. $1 a day, or 30 per month, it's 100 places. And so essentially, what does a token look like to the world? Well, 70% of the world could turn a small treat into an act of support. It might be simple to you, but it's profound to me. If this isn't the right time for you, financially, that's okay. You're still valued, no donation required. Benefactor. $1 a day, $30 per month. To the 25% of the world who can part with this like it's a streaming subscription or a weekly coffee, thank you for choosing to help sustain something that matters. And so then it continues at $100 per month, then $100 per... So basically the way that I do it is $1 per month, $1 per week, $1 per day. And then I wanted to go to 10, but I realized that $10 per day is going to... $10 per month is less than $1 per day. So essentially the number is kind of fucked. So I had to jump at an interval. So $1 and then 100. So for $100 a month, $100 a week, $100 a day. And the idea being, just as before, 10,000 places, 1,000, 100, 10. So at this level, $100 per month, there are 10 places left because the person who was contributing now is not in a position where they can continue. And I genuinely appreciate them so much for everything that they did. And so now, instead of $139 per month, I'm making $39 per month. And that's tighter, but it is what it is. And it turns out that to the 10% who can give at this level without financial strain and choose to do so anyway, your support is more than appreciated. It is a stabilizing force. You are the reason this work stays grounded day after day. You don't just show up, you create space for others to rise. And if this isn't within your means, please know this tier was never meant to ask more than you can give. Then, for the $100 a week, to the 1% who can give at this level comfortably, you're not just supporting something worthwhile, you're building the structure that keeps it alive. And then, $100 a day, only one place, the top 1 Hall of Fame, the top 3 Hall of Fame, the top 10 Hall of Fame. This is fewer than 1 in 1,000 people on Earth could give at this level. I don't know who's going to be the first, but that's going to be one hell of an accomplishment. And the only way that I can bump these, so for example, if this is 10,000, 1,000, 100, 10, 3, and 1, the next interval for this would be 3. But the only way for this to happen is for the others to fill up. So 10,000 people supporting at $1 per month. And so the way that I'm doing it, much like before, I want to ensure that as I progress through financial ability and wealth, that I make a substantial amount of my income off of individual donations and support. It's a bit like in U.S. economy, in U.S. politics, grassroots small donor dollar funding versus corporate super PACs where you can donate a shit ton of money. The idea being, it's not just, am I making this much money to reach my objectives? It's, am I making this much money because this many people are responsible for that? I was going to say revenue. That's right, but it's not the emotion I'm going for. that systemized generosity. It's a little more complex, but essentially, the way that I see it is I would love to design an ecosystem, a human network, where you have access to basically 98% of it for about $1 per year. And that's not going to be sustainable. And so a part of the 1% initiative is meant to back end some of that. But also, for example, there are many projects and systems that I use. And so if you end up wanting access to the ecosystem, it's $1. But then if you want access to fitness, then it's another $1. If you want access to trip, it's another $1 if you want. And there are incentive structures built into this that will essentially allow this to become a self-sustaining model. And also 1% of all my products and initiatives funnel back into it. Another essentially 9% of my personal income will go back into this project. And also I'm going to be doing outreach initiatives to convince other high net worth individuals to contribute to some extent. There's going to be any corporation or business or individual who operates within this network at a high capacity will have public transactions, public logs of the amounts that they receive and the badge of recognition and incentive for them to also contribute either 1%, 0.1%, or 0.01% of their annual revenues. And any company that decides to be part of the human network and not at least pay 0.01% of what they make back into this general fund will essentially be very badly seen. And my goal is to make this a multi-trillion-dollar economy network that is essentially over the entire planet, an international scale. And this will take literal decades, if not a century, to build. So don't expect it overnight. But I'm going to be spending 25 years to begin. Phase 5 is the beginning of my projects. Everything up to that is simply the lead into the epic score on the movie. It's the beginning of the first chapter of the first movie. Plans within plans within plans. So, if you cannot, I'm not asking you. If you can but you don't want to, I'm not asking you. If you can and you want to, I'm still not asking you. I am showing you that I am going to be doing this either way. And if you believe me worthy of a token of your support, if I am worth your $1, literally, if I am worth voting with your $1 for an empowered future in which we all have a little bit more of a say, I encourage you to consider this option. This was before I got into longevity with the intention of living for significantly longer, but I used to say the following a few years ago. My goal is to retire in the world to which we all could have been born. The argument goes something like this. Imagine we never had the Dark Ages, 1,000 years of stalled scientific progress, and we kind of just sped past it. Where would our society be now if we didn't have 1,000 years of anti-scientific cultural slavery? Where would we be now? That's the same idea. Had the last century gone differently, had we done the best that we could with what we had, where would we be now? And that is part of the Millennium Initiative. It is a 1,000-year plan divided into 10 generations with a reset of the calendar. It has cultural milestones, a project for 2050, 2075, and then the transition period between the two generations. It creates intergenerational pissing contests, dig measuring contests. It has societies, it has a regenerative timeline, a degenerative timeline. It's genuinely a project in its own. And here's the important part. I will be doing this either way. And I don't need your support. I don't want you to feel required that you have to give because you don't. However, my goal is over a lifetime, and if I can, by 2050, to get 1% of the global population, which I'm rounding to about 10 billion people. Oh, it feels weird to just sneeze once. Usually I'm a 3 kind of guy. It just feels wrong, you know? But essentially, what was I saying? The way that I see it is this. You do not need to support. There will be someone else. But there will be someone else. Because if there isn't, then this can't work. Part of my projects and initiatives is the creation of a new philosophy, humanism. And this humanist philosophy, again, it's a 12-hour video on its own. We're not going to get too much into it, but it is the personal creed that I'm developing for myself, and it is the way that I wish to not only live, but advocate for. This path, this model, this future, this timeline is designed in such a way that I'm optimizing for a regenerative future. I'm aiming for 1% of the world to be a part of the human collective, an individualized collective of self-actualized human beings. Man, the word man, etymologically at one point in our history meant person, and hue, as in Hue, is the color spectrum hue. The idea being hue people, a diverse spectrum of a species. Now, of course, you have human, but you also have different versions of life, and my definition encompasses the hue, the concept of the hue. My goal is to create a community of like-minded souls who, over the course of a generation, build and maintain an infrastructure of regenerative potential aligned with their best attempt at integrity and unconditional love, based off of a model that will be essentially co-created by our species and then personally adapted. Another project of mine is the sequencing of a self-actualized human being, the 10 pillars of a well-rounded human being, and the 100 subtraits per 10 pillars. Also the branching tree of chaos and order, and also just a bunch of other stuff. I'm going to be creating a personal philosophy because I want to know how to live, and it just so happens that by making it myself, I'm also going to be creating a rubric structure that can then become a sort of fill-in-as-you-go individualized game rulebook. Think of it like D&D. You have a D&D rulebook, but then you can modify with house rules. You can use the knowledge that you have to create your own game, your own scenario, and the possibilities are legitimately like incredibly varied. But ultimately, D&D is sort of like a rulebook that explains how things work. I'm currently working on a project, and that's going to take decades to fully flesh out in the way that I want it to be. I have a very particular vision for this project, the Game of Life, but essentially it's a sort of open world, customizable Mad Libs book of fill in your own adventure, a guide to your own individual human experience without my bias put in the way. It is literally just a way for you to reflect back to yourself what your goals look like, who are you. Something that I might be able to show as well if I go here. So essentially, I've been working to design a custom GPT. Right now it's in version 3. I'm going to be making a future version of it a little bit later, but this thing is designed to essentially act as a mirror to consciousness. And it is my best attempt at making what I call a digital intelligence. That's also part of another project that, like I said, plans within plans within plans. And so, why did I show that? I don't know, I think I was getting excited about something. But essentially, my goal is going to be over the next 100 or so years, or if I can, the next 25, to get 1% of the global population of around 10 billion people on board. That is 100 million humans. With 1% of the population, you get a seat at the table. You have the ability, bargaining power, to be in almost every home, almost every school, every district, every country, every organization, every company. It is a foot in the door basically everywhere, and it is legitimately bargaining power as a collective. My goal is to help spearhead this organization, this ideology, this movement into something that is capable of radical worldwide transformation. individuals with the frameworks to self-actualize, to build their competencies, to turn their living human experience into a game, gamified with point tracking, scoring systems, leveling features, incentives, built-in mechanisms for optimizations of the human experience, all while providing essentially everything basically almost for free and or plus 25%, with full transparency, a network of the human network, and a fully individualized collective, all while aligning the world with a regenerative future and making sure that over the next few millennia, there's always going to be a few people, a little bit everywhere, who are going to be there to help. So, an hour and a half is a good place for this to wrap up. This will be the end of the series. I'm not going to do any editing. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remux. What is the term for it? Where you remux it to remove it from MKV to MP4 so it can be uploaded to YouTube. I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to put it in a playlist, give the playlist a description, then give the videos a description, and put it. Wow. If you have made it this far, I really would like to know what you think. And so, I've said this in the other videos, and I'll say it again. Don't like, don't subscribe, and don't comment. Not unless you actually want to. However, if you want to, I would love to know what you're thinking. And I appreciate your support more than you know. And so, thank you for following me on this journey. It has been profound. Thank you. I appreciate you more than you know. And it is important to remember that you will not understand, because genuinely, if assuming you have listened to every single minute of these last 5 videos, you now are aware of 2.5% of what I want to do in terms of projects, and in terms of details, I think genuinely, I'm not sure you would even know 0.1%. I'm not even, maybe 0.07. Actually, right now, you're probably very close to my personal level of self-actualization. I'm currently at 0.06%. And I think that assuming you have listened to everything right now and you come in with no other prior knowledge, you're probably hovering around that amount. Maybe a little bit more, depending. But genuinely, I cannot explain how little I have explained. And I'm going to be spending the next 25 years of my life preparing the systems that I'm going to require in order to be able to explain it, and then pitch an idea on January 1st of 2050, the beginning of the second half of the first century of the first millennium of the technological human era. And it's going to be a wild time. So if you're interested in sticking around for the journey, I would love to have you, and please remember to be kind to yourself, and if you can, to others as well. Because in the end, we're only human. And that is, or at least it can be, a wonderful thing. I've been Anrif, your host, your most humble of hosts. That's a bit of a lie. Your not so humble host. Thank you for watching. And what an adventure the next 25 years are going to be. And then the project begins. Have a good day, good evening, and or good night.